Imagine a man who, in the suffocating heat of India, would not rise until he felt the heavens had moved. A man whose prayer seemed to touch the very throne of God, drawing forth answers that transformed lives, cities, and nations. That man was John Hyde, the man of prayer. Have you ever heard of John Hyde, known for the somewhat provocative booklet Apostle of Prayer? Hyde was a fervent missionary who marked his generation with his dedication to intercession and cross-cultural missions. With his life centered on prayer, John Nelson Hyde became an inspiration to Christians worldwide. His impact was so profound that his prayers and missionary work among the Tamil-speaking people continue to be studied and admired today. This mini-documentary has one mission: to inspire you. John Hyde was no ordinary missionary. He was a spiritual warrior who literally sacrificed his health, comfort, and at times even his life for something many of us underestimate: the power of intercession. Do you believe a single person can change the course of a nation? What if I told you that through his prayers, John Hyde led multitudes to Christ and opened the doors to a great revival? In the next few minutes, you'll discover how this man faced spiritual giants, wept for souls until his heart physically shifted, and left a legacy that still echoes today. This is not just a story to inspire. It is a challenge to rethink your walk with God. John Hyde was born in November 1865 and lived a life comparable to the great heroes of faith. He did not just pray. He wrestled in prayer, often remaining before God for hours until he received answers. Just as Elijah spoke and heard the divine voice, Hyde had deep intimacy with God, experiencing profound and solitary moments with his Master, the kind of moments Jesus himself called us to live. It was as if he lived in two worlds at once. His earthly dwelling was in India, amid the challenges of the mission field, but his spirit resided in heaven. He had an insatiable hunger for God, so intense that it seemed to consume all physical appetite. This devotion was evident to everyone around him. A young Hindu once told a missionary, "Mr. Hyde seems like God to me." Though this might sound exaggerated, it reflected a deep truth. Hyde lived so close to God that his presence radiated something supernatural. While many measure a missionary's impact by the number of visits made or contacts established, Hyde demonstrated that a Christian's greatest weapon is not activity, but prayer. He did not merely fulfill his responsibilities with zeal. He made prayer the foundation of all his work. Hyde believed in the unmatched power of intercession, and his life proved it. As the Aramaic translation of Psalm 91 verse 1 suggests, he had made God his permanent dwelling. Therefore, he lived in constant contact with divine omnipotence. His prayers were not just requests. They were spiritual battles that shaped history. The effects of John Hyde's intercession extended far beyond what he could see. Many revivals in India can be directly linked to his dedication to prayer. Preachers and missionaries who encountered him were forever changed. One of them, evangelist Jabe Wilbur Chapman, said, "I owe more to Hyde, the praying man, than to any other, for I finally understood what a consecrated life truly is." Just as in the early church, where Peter's shadow healed the sick, the spiritual presence of Jesus seemed to touch lives through John Hyde. Hundreds testified to the impact of his prayers, being renewed and led to a deeper commitment to God. Hyde proved that a single vessel of prayer could be more powerful than 1,000 active workers who do not dedicate themselves to communion with God. He reminds us that prayer is not secondary. It is the very foundation of a Christian's life. E.M. Bounds, a classic writer on prayer, once emphasized how small we feel before the greatness of this calling. Hyde embodied the truth that prayer is the very breath of a Christian. It can be exhausting and demanding, but it is also the sweetest source of communion with God. He lived Psalm 77 verse 13. "Your way, O God, is in the sanctuary." Hyde's father was a man of vision who prayed for workers to be sent into the vast mission fields. In this atmosphere of fervent spirituality, young John found his master and had his life transformed. Initially, he faced an intense inner battle before deciding to go to India. But upon hearing God's response, he surrendered completely and became a servant fully yielded to the Lord's will. His love for the lost was as intense as his devotion to God. Hyde was known for his compassion and self-sacrifice. Once, he saw a man wearing clothes stolen from him, but instead of confronting him, he prayed for him. Days later, that man was deeply moved and confessed, "He has no fault. He is like Jesus." Hyde didn't just talk about Christ's love, he lived it. When deceived or robbed, he prayed for those responsible. He often gave his own clothes to those in need. His life of sacrifice not only won hearts but also opened doors for the gospel. Before a powerful revival in Calcutta, Hyde spent days in intense prayer, crying out, "God, give me souls." This wasn't just a repeated phrase. It was the reflection of his burning heart for those who did not yet know the Savior. Even when confined to a bed, Hyde never ceased his intercessions. His passion for India remained unshaken despite suffering. But what made this man such an extraordinary instrument in God's hands? The answer lay in his relentless pursuit of holiness. He lived by the principle that the self must not only die but be buried, so that no trace of pride or ego would drive souls away from Christ. Hyde sought daily sanctification, not as a religious duty, but as complete surrender to God. Like Elisha, who was called a holy man of God, Hyde radiated divine presence. His spiritual power did not come from human strategies, but from the unstoppable force of personal holiness and a life of prayer. This dedication to sanctification and prayer made him a spiritual giant and left a message that still speaks today. We cannot settle for outward religious activities and a dead faith. Our hearts must beat with a life of devotion and consecration. May the example of John Hyde awaken our love for Christ and inspire us to seek a holy life, sustained by fervent prayer. John Hyde dedicated 19 years of his life to ministry in India, leaving behind a legacy of prayer, holiness, and missionary zeal that continues to inspire. His last words, as he was about to enter the gates of heaven, resounded as a victorious cry. Shout the victory of Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching, and until the next video.